The Man versus the State by Milton Meyer, and we're going to read The Obnoxious Man, because Murray Rothbard marked it in the margins, so I guess it is going to be a really good one. The political philosopher, just like the judges, either disagree flatly with the theories and the statements they quote, or retreat to crude equivocation or honest ambivalence, seditious, false, repugnant, or civil to civil society, says Hobbes, of course, of notions that every man is judge of good and evil actions. The law is the public conscience by which he hath already undertaken to be guided. Locke finds it an inconvenience, I confess, that attends all governments whatsoever, when the governors have brought it to this pass, to be generally suspected of their people. I've never read this book, but Murray Rothbard suggested it, and I guess that's all you need in order to read a book. So pick it up and get educated. We are joined by the one and only Dr. Walter Block. Shut the microphone on. I hope you heard that. So, Dr. Block, how are you doing here at Mises University, and how do you enjoy it so far?
Very much. It's very good. I enjoy it greatly.
Absolutely. And we just talked about, before we hit the live stream on air, that you were one of the main students and friends of the amazing Murray Rothbard. So what can you tell about him, his character, and him as a person?
Well, I was never a formal student of his because I never took his class, although one time I substituted for him. He taught at Brooklyn Polytech, and he had to be out of town or something, and he asked me to take over his class. So I'm honored that I was a substitute teacher for Murray Rothbard. I was a friend of his for many years. You know, there's that cardboard cutout of him on the second floor. And, you know, every time I see it, subconsciously I say, Murray, you're here. And then reality strikes again. And obviously Murray is not with us, but I think about him pretty much every day. I certainly think about him whenever I think about political economy, which I think about pretty much every day. So I don't know. The Reader's Digest once had a series, My Most Unforgettable Person, and Murray is certainly one of my most unforgettable people. And it was a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be friends with him. My one complaint about him was stomach cramps. He was so funny, and I was sitting in his living room for hour after hour just laughing uproariously at his mimicry and his critiques of all the people that be in political economy. He just had me laughing and laughing and laughing. It was horrible.
Well, I guess that is a good problem to have,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And for me, Murray Rothbard is definitely one of my biggest mentors. I read his amazing book, For a New Liberty, twice in one sitting, because it just opened my eyes to what anarchy is and what freedom is really all about. And one of the things that I appreciate most about him were the Rothbard circles in his living rooms, where you just sat and talked and talked and talked until 4 o'clock in the morning, just to get up the next morning, well, to do more talking. So what could you say about those Rothbard circles, and what did you talk about?
Well, it wasn't really a circle. I don't know. I regard it as sort of the living room crowd, and we would talk about just about anything. Economics, politics, philosophy, sociology, culture. And also, Murray was a big Risk player. Risk is a game sort of not like chess, a little like chess. The idea is to take over the world. So you have dice, and, you know, if I'm trying to take over your country, I roll the dice, you roll the dice, and if I'm higher than you, I take one of your soldiers away. And Murray would cackle away with glee over these games. And he would say that only us anarchists could really play this game without our hand behind our back, because everyone else really wanted to take over the whole world, and we were the only ones who didn't. So we were the only ones who could play it honestly. So it wasn't just, I mean, there was a lot of serious talk. And I remember one time Roger Garrison came, and he was going to show his, at that time, very new stuff on macroeconomics, where he was trying to put stuff on diagrams which had never been put on before. And Roger must have come, I don't know, for dinner at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. And then around 11, he was sort of making overtures to leave, because, you know, he was a polite guy. He's from the South. Everyone from the South is polite. And, Murray was saying, Roger, what are you doing? And Roger didn't realize that this seance or this activity was going to go on until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And Roger was ready to leave like a at, I don't know, 11 or 12 or something like that. So Roger had to be integrated into the Weltanschauung or the culture here. It was a very special culture.
I can only imagine how amazing it was. And we have here with us Attila, who is, in my opinion, one of the really, really smart kids here or young adults, young men here at Mises University. He is 16 years old and already incredibly well educated. And you have the privilege of working with the Murray Rothbard of today, which is Walter Block. But it is true, and it comes from the heart. So could you just talk a little bit about what you do with Dr. Block and how you experienced working with him?
It started off, can I step down? It started off with me emailing Dr. Block. I'm working on an extended essay project for the IB program. I was emailing him for an interview, and he responded and told me he got knee surgery, and he was on painkiller drugs. And so about 2 weeks later, I emailed him with another email and said, do you have any internships? And he said, no, but what I can do is we can possibly co-author a journal article together, and you can send me a draft, and if it's good enough, we can co-author it and publish it in a scholarly journal. And so I immediately jumped on that and wrote an abstract, sent it to him. He approved and wrote the whole draft, and he has looked at it so far, and hopefully we'll finish looking at it. Hopefully it'll be, hopefully it won't have any mistakes, and he'll approve of it to be published in a journal. But yeah, and then now I get to meet him in person, and I view Dr. Block almost as Murray liked. He's not only brilliant and comes up with some of the most creative ideas, like water capitalism, space capitalism. I mean, that's just, never would have thought of that. And of course, his application of private property rights to all sorts of things is also very creative. But along with that, he's humorous and funny in the same sense that Murray is. I mean, I remember yesterday he ended off the lecture by saying, "Ah, snap, bitch," or something like that. So he's quite a character.
He is, and he's definitely so much appreciated in this community. It is amazing to see him stand in the middle of a circle of 30 students and just talking about economics and answering all those questions. So Dr. Block, what are your experiences with working with young students like him, and how can you support them, and why do you do it?
Well, why I do it is I'm trying to pass, in a relay race, quarter-mile relay, everyone does a quarter mile, it's a mile. They pass a baton, or in the quarter-mile race, everyone does 100 yards, and they pass on a baton. Well, Murray passed on a baton to me. It wasn't a physical baton, and it wasn't a race, but he passed on something to me, and I try to pass it on. And I'm delighted that maybe, more than a half dozen of my former students are now professors at various universities. One of them is teaching here, Ed Stringham. He's a former student of mine. Other former students of mine have taught here and are teaching at various other universities. So I'm just delighted with that. And another thing that Attila forgot to mention is that the reason he's here, I take full credit for that.
Oh, yes.
Because he was going to go to the Cato Institute week-long seminar, and I said, well, the Cato's okay, but this is way better. And he parents' permission, and finally we did that. And to make a long story very short, he's here. I take credit for that. I don't take credit for being the Murray Rothbard. I mean, that's he's way above what I deserve. Just to mention me in the same sentence as Murray Rothbard is a great honor.
Absolutely, but it's an honor well deserved. We are here with the WorldCryptoNetwork, and of course this is a Bitcoin channel. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is the currency that represents the Austrian economic ideal of the money in the most perfect way. So what I have done is I took the amazing book by Murray called What Has Government Done to Our Money, and I replaced the world gold with Bitcoin. And it turns out that the argument that he provides, in my opinion, work almost even better than gold. So what are your thoughts on Bitcoin? And what do you think Murray would have thought about a free and private currency that the individual user owns?
Well, first of all, Bitcoin is not a currency. It's a type of currency. A currency, money means generally accepted. And if you go to McDonald's with Bitcoin, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's not a money yet. It might well become a money, and it's certainly voluntary. But there are problems with it vis-a-vis gold. I mean, gold was money, and somehow the government made it not a money anymore. If I had my druthers, I would pick gold over Bitcoin. One, because gold was a money when people were free to choose. I mean, Milton Friedman has a book, or he's free to choose, but we're not free to choose gold. He was a bitter opponent of gold, and probably a bitter opponent of Bitcoin too. But Milton Friedman is no Murray Rothbard. I think Murray would have been a lot more amenable to Bitcoin than Milton would have been. And but there are other problems. Because the government got rid of gold, the government can get rid of Bitcoin. All they have to do is say the death penalty for anyone using Bitcoin, and that'll put a grip on it. Now, they don't have to put the death penalty, but they can stop it. Another problem with Bitcoin is electricity. It's dependent upon electricity. If there's no electricity, and there might not be sometimes the way the government is working, then there'll be no Bitcoin. Whereas gold doesn't depend upon electricity, so gold will go on. Other than that, I think it's a magnificent initiative on the part of a bunch of very creative people. I'm a fan of it. I'm a supporter of it. If I had to rank things, I would put first Bitcoin second and U.S. currency a long way third.
Yes, and the beautiful thing about anarchy in money, which, by the way, I'm writing part of my bachelor thesis on, is that we now can choose. We can choose what we have. And we should not only use one thing. We can experiment. So yes, we can use both. Bitcoin and gold can coincide because Bitcoin is a good digital currency and gold is a good real-life physical currency. And yes, there are problems with Bitcoin. You bring up the electricity. And if the internet goes down, well, we're going to be in chaos anyhow. And I think that Bitcoin will survive much longer than anything else in such a system. But eventually, it might fail because of a complete lack of electricity. That is a valid point. But to your point that Bitcoin is not money, I would have to disagree here. Because we have to argue on the side of the individual, of the free human being that can choose whatever currency he's using. And so if we can take me as a case example, I have been living with Bitcoin as my only currency since 1.5 years. I buy my groceries, my clothes. I bought my flight ticket here to Mises University, and I'm going to buy at the bookstore a Mises and Rothbard silver coin, and I'm definitely going to pay with Bitcoin because I don't have silver with me. So Bitcoin can be a money, and I've met people that have been living on Bitcoin since 2011. Yes, it is the early stages, and yes, the entire world is not yet using money, Bitcoin as a money. But we can and we will, because already it is possible. So Attila, what are your thoughts?
I just want to say one thing. I want to pick one word out of what you said, and that word is disagree. Now, you're a young kid. I'm an old duffer. How dare you disagree with me? It would be one way to react to that, which I'm not going to react that way. I model myself after Murray Rothbard in many, many ways. I always insisted that everyone call him Murray, not Dr. Rothbard. So I always insist everyone call me not Murray, but Walter. And the other thing about Murray is that he not only tolerated disagreement, but he reveled in it, he relished it, he welcomed it, as I do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to give in to you. I think you're wrong on this issue, but we can disagree happily, politely, and productively, and learn from each other. My understanding of a money is generally accepted means. Now, just because you weirdo, and I use that as a compliment because we're all weirdos around here, just because you use Bitcoin, I can't believe that. You go to McDonald's with Bitcoin?
That is one argument for shopping decentralized. So I go to local farmers market to buy my food because it is a decentralized store with small business. And I do not only use Bitcoin, I also use gold and silver whenever the store owner does not accept Bitcoin. But what I never do is use fiat money because it is immoral and wrong.
Wow. Wow. Well, I hate to say this, but I've got a wallet here, and I've got a couple of 20s and a couple of 10s, and I use it. And I don't think it's moral and wrong to use it any more than it's moral and wrong to use the public streets, and you use the public streets, and you use, I don't know, the sidewalks, and you use maybe a library, and maybe the postal service, and I don't know, a museum, a park. You know, where I am in New Orleans is Audubon Park, and I use that. So I don't think it's a problem to do that. I don't think it's fiat currency. Now, I agree with you that fiat currency is highly problematic. But still, you know, the definition that everyone agrees to is generally accepted, and so far it's not a money. Thanks for having me on your show. I've got to go to lunch. Otherwise, those greedy people eat up all the lunch.
Well, Walter, I thank you endlessly for all the work that you have done here at the Mises Institute, and I thank you for joining us today. And
my pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. And have a good lunch.
Thank you.
Well, we're just going to keep talking Bitcoin. And again, thank you to Walter. He is really, really one of the most amazing people that we've met so far. He is amazing in every shape or form, a great economist, a great philosopher, a great speaker, but just all around a great human being. And we owe so much to him because he has been fighting for our freedoms, for your freedoms, since quite some time. And same did that guy, Murray Rothbard. So Attila, what do you say about the arguments of Walter Block, and just talk whatever you want to talk about?
I don't want to bash the man when he's not here. I'll say it to his face. But he was making an interesting point about the electricity thing. And I just wanted to say, in the same way, you could make a similar argument to gold. Remember, Bitcoin can't be censored or blocked by the government in any way. The only real way they can stop you is actually stopping you and stopping the transactions, but they can't suppress the money itself. But that brings an interesting point, because with gold and anything physical, the government can seize it from you. They can send the police and the military, if they have to go after it and confiscate it from you. And this is based on experience, because this happened during the Depression, I believe, when FDR seized the gold stocks for the most part, leaving just a little bit of gold for decoration type purposes. But besides that, really, it was completely illegal to own gold. And I believe it was in the 1970s where it was legalized and you were allowed to own gold. So you can see, even though gold and silver, they're great, they have the physical properties aren't always a great thing. They can be seized and whatnot. But with Bitcoin, sure, there may not, if you don't have electricity, you may not be able to use it. But I think that's not really something to be too afraid of. I think it's easier for the government to seize physical things than for us to run out of electricity.
Yes, absolutely. And you might say that Bitcoin is tied to the internet, but actually, no, it is not. It is tied to a network. How you connect to this network is up to you. So for example, you can use the Blockstream satellite to sync your Bitcoin blockchain on your full node. And I even believe that you can send transactions. You absolutely can receive transactions. I'm not 100% sure if you can send transactions. So you can already run a full node without the internet. Furthermore, what I actually have done personally is send a Bitcoin transaction via Pigeon. Well, lunch is important. We need our energy, right? So you can send a Bitcoin transaction at the leg of a pigeon that you send to someone who's running a full node who will propagate that to the network. But I see we are being joined live from Paris by the one and only Ricardo. How are you doing, my friend?
Excellent, man. Doing really good. I've just been doing some research, checking on the lectures, and trying to get some content out as well, which I'm failing on. But really good. I actually got to watch some of the last guests, the Omniacs, the other previous guest from Finland, his channel.
Nico, yes.
Yes, Nico.
From Maximum Liberty.
There it is, Maximum Liberty. That was a really good channel. I got to watch it. Great startup. Definitely going to look into it a little bit more. So definitely think that people should be realizing that the projects, they don't need to go too far, meaning you don't need to go and find marketing about the stuff after you've done research, then apply it. Because a lot of people, they do the research and then there's an application, they kind of move to the next thing, or they go back onto their normal relapse. You need to get out of that. That's what Bitcoin is trying to do, is trying to get you out of that system of relapse, constant relapse. It's creating a change. And I just talked about this in my live cast right before I got over here. And I don't believe that blockchain is a bubble. Bitcoin might be a bubble, speculatively. Blockchain is not the bubble. Blockchain is the gift. It's the means of exchange. Peer-to-peer, it's the means of being able to record different transactions, being able to create a complete ledger, either publicly or privately, that only peer-to-peer can access and use. We're taking out the banks. We don't need that anymore, and it's crumbled. It's the point where we as a society and the young age realize this. People that don't have bank accounts, they're never going to have bank accounts. So this is a time for everybody to now apply it. Okay, you have the internet of money in your hands. Okay, if you want to buy some gold, digital gold, go get some Bitcoin. Go get some Satoshis. Put some money in now, because if it goes up to 8 over the weekend, if it goes up to 9. Even if it goes down, at least you're not buying when it's too high, and you're not buying when it's either too low, if that's what you're trying to get into. If not, go get into blockchain technology. Figure out how it's going to be applied in your life, whether that means you're going to the DMV and you're going faster, whether that means maybe taking a little bit of money and saving it and putting it into crypto, or whether that means getting out of banks and trying to figure out how can you store your assets into a currency that's not controlled, that's not going down, and doesn't support negative, bad things. All right, guys. I say that very generally, things.
Great points that you bring up. And I agree, Nico is a great guy. I've been working with him personally for quite some time now. And he is one of those open source entrepreneurs, just like I am. He decided that he no longer wanted to work for institutions that try to control him and to try to manage him like an asset. No, he said, I'm a free human being, and I want to work on the projects that I full-heartedly and 100% support. And this is mostly the case with open source project. Why? Because he's an anarchist, right? He's a libertarian, he's a freedom lover. And he understands the property of non-scarce goods and that we should share information as freely as possible. And that is, by definition, the open source movement, because it is radically open. And so is Bitcoin. So we are all working here on Bitcoin in some shape or another, because we are not programmers. At least I'm not. Nico is not. I don't know about you, Rico, but I don't think so. And so no, you're not. And so we have to do something else to provide for the Bitcoin community. What can we do? I can talk. I like to talk, especially about the things that I really 100% want to support and that I know is going to save us from the current state of slavery, and that is Bitcoin. And so you cannot shut me up talking about Bitcoin and Austrian economics. And so why not just put a microphone in front of my face? And that is exactly what you can do also. Find the niche. Find the thing that you are marginally best at. Doesn't matter if you're the best in the entire field. It just needs to be that thing that you are good at, marginally compared to anything else. Competition, yeah, of course, it's important. You should think about that. But first and foremost, do that thing which you are most productive at, and you will bring prosperity, not just to you, but to the entire economy and the entire society.
Well said. Well said. I like the fact that it's where you're at right now is like a capita for reinventing something that's more sophisticated in its measure, meaning money, sound money. And everybody listening is probably trying to figure out, well, I know everybody's trying to figure out the price, but more so, where do they fall in place? And where does their life fit into blockchain? Where does it fall into Bitcoin? And you said, I don't know how to program. I'm learning some very basic programming. So eventually I can, learn, because I know that the schools, when I was living in Australia, a lot of the schools, there was this huge debate about whether to teach kids programming. And a lot of schools thought it was extremely important. And some schools were completely against it. And it's only because of the new change of revolution. And people felt like that's just so hard on kids, make them learn how to program. But kids actually are the ones that soak it up, This programming is a language, okay? And there's one thing I know about language is that we as humans utilize language on a very small scale. We need to realize that language is something you can do on a technological scale, or you can do peer-to-peer. You can go and talk to people. And when you speak in a different language, you're using a different part of your brain, okay? And I think that's another thing that is why people are worried about blockchain, is because it's new and that's nervous. And when you're in a nervous state of mind and your body's dealing with stress, meaning I don't know if I should get in, did I lose money, am I gonna lose money? It's all speculative. All the people that are in control are completely against it, so maybe it won't work. But the thing is, that's a part of your brain that's also being suppressed. You're being fear-mongered into it. And in the United States, this is absolute, because I've only been come and gone. Every time I come and go, I realize there is a level of fear in the air. It's electric, okay? And the energy is charged with it, okay? Now, you go to other countries and you don't feel this as much, especially islands, because there's not a lot of mass for the energy to bounce off of. And I'm actually looking into creating your own grounding units, where you can just, like, it's a coil with magnets that have been reversed, and you put them on you, and it's to create an energy field around you, so that way you don't get hit with Wi-Fi, like 5G Wi-Fi, which only exists in America as of that I know of now. But all these things that are happening right now, they're oppressing blockchain technology. They're oppressing the change, and it's normal for you as a person listening to be scared. But if you don't apply things, then the change is going to happen whether you like it or not. Okay, so I think people can protect themselves. They can arm themselves. They can shield themselves by doing education, by educating themselves. And where you're at right now is doing awesome, educating people of all ages at all different levels of economic stature, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a minimalist, whether you're a maximalist, whether you're into fiat, whether you're into gold, or whether you're into this new age of generation money, okay? So be aware, change is happening, that's what you feel, but the fear, you can control the fear. Use it as a tool. Don't use it as something that's gonna control your decisions. Don't make your decisions based off of fear, okay? Make it off of intent and good intention and passion rather than fear. So, yeah, I don't know what the question was, but I kind of got off on a tangent. Sorry about that. I do that.
That is very good. We want to be off a tangent, right? And absolutely, fear is huge in our current society. And what is fear? It is the absence of love. Just as cold is the absence of heat. Or just like polarity, we have a positive pole and a negative pole is the absence of the positivity. So fear is based in love, and love comes before fear. So if we start loving each other, loving ourselves, loving our environment, loving Bitcoin, well, upon others, then yes, we can live in a beautiful and prosperous society. And that's what we are fighting all about. That is what the natural law principle is. It is love. Love in yourself and in your property, but because you love yourself and your own property, you necessarily also love the others and the property of the others. Because we are all beautiful human creatures that are conscious, and it's a miracle that we are here, and we should love that. And I don't speak about romantic love, no, I speak about care with a capital C. I speak about the non-aggression principle. And this is really, really important. And I think it is missing in today's society. Because, well, I don't think that the government is going to talk about it, obviously, because guess what? Government does not love. They do not. They work based on fear. They work based on the absence of love. They work based on aggression and the threat of violence. And, well, I do not think that this is good. I think we human people are free, and we are loving, and we are caring. And we should love and care for each other. So absolutely, Rico, you're 100% right. And then if you look at yesterday's video and you see the chemtrails flying over in Paris, that is the government. And if you think that that is love, think again.
Absolutely. There is a lot to be said about blockchain technology. We reached the summit because we can't repeat the thing anymore. We've created such a high level of awareness and such a young level of people who are ready to make a change that it finally has happened, okay? Be it the new people that are coming into the space creating blockchains, or be it Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin, okay? It has created this platform. So now that this is in front of us, how are you going to utilize it, okay? How are you going to yield it so that way it's not something that's going to pass you by and you have to deal with it later, meaning it's already implemented and it's more of an annoyance. People are scared of change, but liberation is better than just being in a prison, you know? And I believe that Bitcoin allows this a bit of liberation. It gives you freedom to say, no, I will not support fiat. No, I will not buy into your banks. No, I will not do as you want me to do. I will be as I want to be. And I kind of came across that when I was like, you know what, I don't want to live in a corporate world, and became an entrepreneur. Not easy. Takes time. It's a ongoing daily thing. It's easy to go in and check into a job and check out for 8 hours mentally and then check back into reality and realize that that's your life. But I think Bitcoin allows people to see that there is liberation in decision, and the decision has almost been taken from you, you know, because you're too scared to go out and seek change. But it's uncomforting, you know, change is uncomforting. I have lived in a lot of different countries, and for the first time living in a country where I don't speak the language, well, not the first time, but, you know, speaking another new language has, there's something that comes alive in you, and it's only because you're in a situation where you have to perform, you know, and if you're never affected to make it to your, excuse me, if you're never put in a situation where you have to perform, you're never going to learn. I think Martin Luther King Jr. said, real education is applied in the world. It's when you apply the education you've learned. It's when you make mistakes. And, you know, we don't know where the market's going when it comes to the price, but we know where the currency structures are going. And it's not staying in fiat anymore. It's sad to say that it took us this long to get here. And this technology has been around, but they're still oppressing it with everything they have. This is the war. This is the silent war of money, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. And you said that education is key, and I absolutely agree. And you quoted Martin Luther King that said we need to act, we need to do stuff. Only then do we know that we actually have done something, that we've learned something. And that is something that is called the Trivium. There is external information, and you have to take on this information in grammar. So, you know, this comes to you. This is the first step, the gathering of information. That can be provided to you externally. You can read books, you can watch lectures, you can watch the World Crypto Network, you can go to Mises.org, right? That is all information. That is something that happens externally to you. Then the next step is called logic. This means you, in your own mind, heart, and gut, are going to try to understand this information. You're going to pick it apart, take out the good things, leave the bad ones, and then you have acquired understanding, okay? So information is knowledge, understanding, well, is understanding. And then the third step, and this is also just as important, is acting upon the understood information. And that is rhetoric. You know, you want to go out there and speak the truth. You want to go out there and live by the truth. But you can only do that if you understand the information that was given to you. And without this, you cannot learn. This is the age-old trivium that has been taught since forever and ever and ever. But guess what? The government is not teaching it to you. Why? They only teach you stuff, but they do not teach you how to learn. And you also brought up the important aspects of freedom and liberty. Let me just read you a short quote by the one and only Patrick Henry. He was a freedom fighter in the secession wars from Great Britain and the Americas. And he had this quote in one of his amazing speeches. He was a hardcore anarchist, hardcore libertarian, hardcore freedom lover and freedom fighter. And so the British Empire just killed a bunch of Americans. And he said, no, 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 we do not do this. This is wrong. And he was appealing for self-defense, to pick up weapons and to defend your liberty, your life, and your property against the British well, colonists. And it just might happen so that actually here at the conference is a direct descendant of this amazing man, and he will be on the show probably tonight, maybe tomorrow. He's a great guy. So I'm going to read this quote by Patrick Henry. If this be treason, and he means self-defense, if this be treason, make most of it. I know not what others may choose, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And I think this is really powerful, because if you are not a free human being, you are a slave. And that is just fundamentally wrong. And I do not want to live in a world of slavery, which in my opinion, we are in right now. And therefore, I will do anything and everything that I can to liberate us from this current state of slavery and unconsciousness, to bring us into a world of peace and liberty and voluntarism, of anarchy. And
Wow.
we do this by education.
That was borderline ready for a speech. You could have been in front of people. You know what? When it comes to giving somebody liberty versus death, that speaks to a lot of the things that have happened in the history of wars and people just letting people take over because they're not willing to take liberty. They're not willing to fight. They just get taken over. And we live in a passive society. And the aggression is on each other, which creates more of the problem. We're not uniting. We're just dividing. Everything is divided. Everybody looks at each other and they just see walls. They see uncomfortableness. They feel just all alone in the world they live in. And technology has done this. It's supposed to have brought us together. And I think blockchain and Bitcoin can bring us together if it's used right. We need to have an awakening. With this technology should be an awakening. You know, there should be an awakening between every single person who is ready for the next generation, for the next movement of, you know, the internet, but of things. So I was going to say about government, and it's interesting, Patrick Henry, excellent historical figure in America. That's right, give me liberty or give me death. He was a founding father of the Second Virginia Convention in 1775, when America was just crawling out of the womb of freedom. So awesome. Looks like we were joined with a guest. Go ahead and introduce us.
This is TJ, another freedom fighter and lover. Taxation is theft, by the way.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
As always. So we were talking about slavery. What do you think about the current state of slavery in our society?
I think it exists in a lesser extent of, just societally speaking. I think that the government claims at least partial ownership over every person within its confines. So with that in mind, I would say that it exists. I'm not trying to say that like this is comparable to what actual slaves went through, but it's definitely there in that regard. So
absolutely. So I define slavery as someone taking away part of your property, not just once, which would be robbery, but on a recurring and systematic basis. So for example, the black slaves in the Americas, they had to work, but they could not keep the product of their labor. So that was stolen from them, not just once, but recurrently. Probably 80 to 90, sometimes even 100% of all that they worked for has been stolen from them. And I define that as slavery. And I would even go so far to say, if you get only stolen 1% of your income of your products, but on a regular and recurring basis, that this is still slavery. Now, what is the income tax? What is taxation in general? It is theft, but it is not just theft on a one-time basis, but it is on a recurring and on a systematic basis. And therefore, we do live in a slavery system right now, because between like 50 to 80, maybe 95% of your income is stolen from you, not just once, but every day, every month, every year. And I would define that as slavery. Rico, what do you think?
Well, that's excellent what you just said. There was a comment I wanted to say about that in the chat, and slavery. This was from, excuse me, Jeremy Sager, and he said the best slaves are the ones that don't know they're slaves, and that reminds me of the Matrix. It's the reason that I left America. I first initially got into what I do as an entrepreneur to better people, because I wanted to help empower people to be healthier, to make better decisions. And I feel like when a person becomes healthier, and I've seen this, I've seen people lose 200-300 pounds and become marathon runners that would never ever thought they'd ever run. I've had clients like that. I've changed people. That one person, those people, this group of people, these classes, they change like a ripple. It's a wave, and I'm creating these swells of healthy changes. Or when I do a massage and this person is forever changed, that person is no longer the same person before they saw me. They will forever be changed. So I do a lot of energy work, and I think that taxation is theft, getting back to finances. But the reason I left America was because I felt like people didn't realize they weren't being governed. I mean, they were being governed, but they were being almost groomed. They were being almost seeded into thinking they were free, but you're not free. And whether it's the water, whether it's the information, whether it's what's in the air, you know, the things that you're doing have to be done on a massive amount of scale. You have to practice vigilance on every single level in order to become healthy and become aware. And so there is a large amount of people out there that will never learn how to use the power of their mind and the force of will. There's people who want to, but they're just scared, you know, and they hear other people doing it and they see people doing it. But they're too comfortable in their life of complete, you know, slavery. Taxation is slavery. I've tried to tell people about this kind of stuff, and people don't want to hear the bad stuff. They just want to hear what you're having for lunch, and they want to see your pictures of your dogs and your cats on your Instagram and, you know, of your selfies. That's what's being peddled on a mass scale. But finally, this change of awareness is happening on a small scale. So I think that the government has done an awesome job, in a bad sense, to control you, all right? Whether you live in any of the Five Eyes countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, or America, those countries are oppressed in so many ways that I've done research for. But even living in Europe, and I feel less like taxation is theft living in France because I get really good incentives. And even for being an entrepreneur in Paris for the first year, I only have to pay minimal taxes that are just to help me to get by. Where in America, it was like outright theft, you know, getting out of college and then having to do my legal boards and then it was just, I felt like I was just being robbed. And I was like, I don't want to be robbed anymore. So just be aware that you are being robbed in you every single day, whether it's your consciousness, whether it's your vitality, or whether it's your finances, and you're paying them to do it. So just be aware. I think that's why people have gone off the grid. People are like, screw fiat. And even you see Max Kaiser, and he's like, screw metals, you know? Maybe he's still into metals, but I'm saying he's like, Bitcoin, this digital gold, of course, this makes sense. I want to control my money. I want to have my say. I'm sick and tired of people having all their money taking my money and putting it into their rich little hands, you know?
Absolutely great points that you bring up. And we have another statement by Jeremy in the chat. And he is saying that taxation is not really theft because the government, don't just take it out of your account, usually. And the usually is pretty good because most of the time, actually, they do take it out of your account. For example, every time that you get a paycheck, the company automatically pays some to the government as taxation. Well, that is an automatic deduction that you did not agree to. Guess who's here? Bob Murphy. And, well, welcome very much, Bob Murphy. You are, of course, a legend here in the Austrian Economics circles. We had Walter Block on just before you joined. Of course, a great conversation. So the expectations are high, right?
All right, I'll try to live up to it.
So what did you think so far about the Mises University? What were the most interesting things that happened?
This is always the most stimulating event of the year as far as things I participate in. Just right out of the chute, Tom Woods' Sunday talk just really gets everybody fired up, and we do have a good time here, but it reminds you that we're doing this for a reason. You know, that there is a battle between liberty and statism, and one of the important things to do is to try to teach the public these principles. And so that's really what we're doing here, is equipping the next generation of people to go out and, to spread these ideas in various venues.
Absolutely. Dr. Block, Walter talked about that we have to give on the baton. You know, Murray gave it to him, and he will give it to us students.
And Murray is looking over our shoulders.
Exactly, and that's why I'm here sitting, because of course Murray has to be here. And I absolutely agree. We are in a state of war. Currently in America, there are no bullets flying, so it is not a physical war, but absolutely it is a war of the mind. And it is a war of ideologies and a war of, well, ideas, basically. And the powers of ideas are incredible. And Mises talked a lot about that, the immense potential of an idea. Because if I keep an idea to myself, it's just mine, you know, and it doesn't really have that much value. But if I spread it out, if I talk to others about it, if I share my knowledge, if I share my idea and give the other person's information, they can make their own judgment. And they can, well, pick up on my idea, adapt it, improve it, and then continue spreading it. And this is exactly what the Mises Institute is all about, because you guys understand the importance of non-scarce goods, and especially that information should be free and accessible. So I'm asking you, because most of your books are available at Mises.org for free. So people do not have to pay you in order to receive that information. Why are you doing this? Don't you want to make money?
Well, as you say, I mean, I think even, at least certainly from the types of books that the Mises Institute produces, I think in their mind, it's not even obvious. It doesn't necessarily hurt their revenues from book sales to have it free. Because a lot of these, if it's a technical economics book, it's there as a reference. You know, oh, geez, what did Mises say? And you go get the PDF and search for it. It's so convenient. And probably having access to that makes you eventually want to go buy the physical book. So there's that element involved, whereas that, you know, that would be true like with a novel or something. But also, as you say, the point of this, you know, the reason I'm writing the study guide to human action is not to get rich. You're right. So thank you. So there, you know, it's the donors who put up the money to make that project happen are not doing it because they want to make money on it. They're doing it because they want the world to understand human action. So that's why you would have that, something like that, be accessible to everybody. And to go back to your earlier point, yeah, Mises stressed a lot that, following up on the ideas of Hume, that in the long run, there's no such thing as an unpopular government. What he meant was the public tacitly, perhaps out of fatalism, accepts the regime that's in power. And if they didn't, the regime would fall. And this is something that, you know, Etienne Lebete talked about also, that, you know, the tyrant is one person. It's not like in Superman 2 when the Kryptonians came and, you know, no one could stop them because they're so physically strong. Like, if somebody relies on the police force and the army, it's because the soldiers and the police have an ideology that says I should support this ruler. And so ultimately ideas are what determines the course of human history. And that's why, as you say, in the long run, if the best way to fight error is just to show that it's erroneous, and ultimately, you know, which way do the soldiers point the guns? It's based on the ideas in their head. So this isn't really about physical force. It's really about error versus truth.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Ricardo, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Murphy, Professor Murphy from Paris. I am an entrepreneur. My father was an economics major. He worked for Standard Insurance. I don't know if you know who they are. They're in Portland, but extremely good on money and savvy. But I was watching your lecture on government debt, and I just wanted to know if you had just maybe a small, like 30-second rant on what you thought about the debt society that we live in right now.
Sure. So it is, you know, and there's been much made of the fact that our current system is really debt driven, and there's different levels of meaning people can attach to that. So one, the simplest level that's unobjectionable in terms of is this true or not, is that, yeah, I can't speak for other countries as well, but certainly in the United States, there's this consumer culture where, you know, people are getting bombarded with credit card offers when they're just students going to school, and there is this idea of, hey, you know, run up at your credit card bill and it's fine. And of course, the Keynesian mindset that wants to promote consumer spending. And so that's, you know, the idea of, hey, just go out and get people to go spend money. And so what if you're running up bills? And yes, as you were alluding to in that lecture, one of the things I was trying to knock down was this notion among professional economists that, hey, as long as we owe it to ourselves, the government debt is irrelevant, or it's not a burden, and just, you know, walking through why that's so problematic. So it is amazing that far from, you know, in other words, the old school wisdom of live below your means, save and accumulate, invest in the future. If you can't afford something, don't buy it. That has all gone out the window and has actually been inverted, where people think it's a positive virtue and the mark of a sophisticated society, that we run up huge debts, and such that a lot of economists think that, oh, gee, when the financial crisis hit and a lot of people naturally tried to pay down debts, all the Keynesians were saying, oh, this is terrible. You know, we need governments to have huge debts to offset this horrible private saving. And that, of course, is completely wrong. So it is, you know, it's not just that we're having these minor disagreements over technical economics, but this stuff does spill over in the popular culture, such that now people have been led to believe that running up debt and spending is good for the economy.
Absolutely, and this is a two-sided pronged attack on the culture. Jörg Guido Holzmann has a great lecture on the cultural effects of fiat money. And his basic argument, of course, supported by the great economists like Rothbard and Mises, is that on the one hand, because of low interest rates, the producers think that the consumers are saving money today in order to buy their products tomorrow. And so the producers are going to invest more money today in order to produce the goods that they think that the consumers want to have. So they produce a bunch of stuff, which, if the consumers do not want to have them, will be classified as malinvestments. They misallocate resources onto goods, and they want to produce a consumer good, but it turns out that the consumer maybe does not want them. That is a malinvestment. That is on the production side. On the other hand side, if you are the consumer and you can see that the price for money is really, really cheap, and you can, as you said, you can take on debt in order to consume today, although you cannot really afford it, you are incentivized to consume a lot, and do not postpone that consumption until tomorrow or next year, because, well, the money is cheap today. And further, you know, inflation. If you save now, in the future, because of inflation, government inflation, that purchasing power will decrease. And so the consumer is not incentivized to save for the future, but actually to consume right now. And this Mises coined overconsumption. And so on the one hand, we have malinvestments, because the producers think that the consumer is going to save up money. But on the other hand, we have a consumer overconsumption, because they are incentivized to consume right now. And what that basically, well, makes is the business cycle, the boom and bust cycle that we've seen now countless times. And that just creates all kinds of wrong incentives. So maybe could you talk a little bit more about the ethical aspects of that, and where this will lead to us in the long run?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'm largely just paraphrasing some of what you said there, that you're right. In the current environment, you know, just little things like people know that, oh, gee, if you just saved actual cash, you'd be a sucker, right? And so, and that's, of course, coming, you know, you weren't wrong in the 1800s if you just accumulated gold coins and kept them under your mattress. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to do, because the money would retain its purchasing power over long stretches. And so, you know, little things like that. Also, you had mentioned insurance. Well, in the United States, life insurance used to be a major vehicle of people just to save. Like the average person didn't necessarily go into the stock market. That was considered speculative investments. Whereas with the inflation that was unleashed, you know, when Richard Nixon went off the gold standard in the U.S., now average people, in order for, you know, their retirement savings, are in the stock market, because they know if we put it somewhere else, we're going to get killed in terms of inflation. So it does just completely change the landscape. It pushes people to a very low interest rate environment, pushes investors to search for yield, and they get into much riskier things than they otherwise would. And yeah, everything gets turned around. That you say the culture gets corrupted ethically. People have lost, you know, it used to be considered a virtue to save and accumulate, sort of like a Protestant work ethic and thing. And that has all been corrupted such that now looks like you're a fool for doing those sorts of things. So it's not, you actually aren't, but the way that the game has been changed, it does seem like any individual player, if he doesn't engage in these very risky things, is going to fall behind. And yet we know the system as a whole is much more leveraged, much riskier. Another example is guys like Paul Krugman several years ago were writing articles saying that it was like mathematically impossible for people on net to reduce their debt without causing spending to go down. And I was just shown, well, no, that's not right. He was leaving out the possibility of equity finance. Okay, so people, again, have this idea that, oh, in order for a company to take in capital and grow, they need to issue bonds. Now, I'm not saying bond finance is wrong, but I'm just saying, no, they could issue more equity, right? So there's this whole philosophy now where debt is good and you want to get all levered up and do stuff with other people's money. And again, it's wrong economically. And as you say, I think it also spills over into culture and ethics, such that, for a while it was very popular for people to just walk away from homes they had bought, saying, screw it, the government's bailing them out or whatever. And that may be true, but again, just virtues of, people being a little bit reluctant to default on debt, that has been eroded also, because people get so indebted they realize this is crazy and they know the system's rigged. So even things like that, where it used to be a stigma to have declared bankruptcy, now it's almost like a mark of, like, hey, I'm a wheeler dealer, I've been bankrupt 3 times and now I'm a millionaire. That's almost cool in U.S. culture now, whereas before that used to be very shameful.
Ricardo, go ahead. One question.
I just wanted to add into that before I led into the next question. You make an absolute great point about the idea that we have accepted it as a public thing. Maybe more so in America, because I grew up in the States. My parents were minimalists. I mean, we lived near a pretty big city, and we had chickens. We grew our own vegetables. I had very alternative parents. But what this creates is it leaves a steep, well, just say an alternative route of people who are going to be like, you know what, I'm just going to cut myself out and create my own small economic structure just to self-sustain myself. Where on a mass scale, everybody's like, okay, well, we're all in debt and let's just buy everything on credit cards and we'll all just go in debt. And you're right, on a corporate level, these kids get out of school and they're just forced into college and they sign over, their entire future earnings. Literally, they're putting themselves in chains and they're not aware of it. And so it does create a numbing down of what debt is, and it's now become mainstream. Living in Europe and having a French family, they're quite the opposite. I think it's because the culture here has been subjugated to crashes. We have savings in the different areas, but I think in America, it's just like you're just either in debt and you have to spend more money to get out of debt, which makes no sense because you're literally creating the same problem to solve the same problem, which is, it reminds me of a lot of the health systems that are practiced in this day and age, when they could just go a natural way, an alternative route, and just completely take out this overall economic, not economics, actually, it's not even economics, it's just, it's a money-making scheme, So I did want to ask you really quick on a side note about the economics behind the Paris Agreement, because I had to say that the more that I studied it, the less I became fond of it, and I kind of started to think that it's so sad that international powers are literally they're not trying to find solutions, they're just willing to almost just brush each other's debt underneath the carpet. And it leads up to the big question is, how long is this going to happen, Yeah,
sure. So you're talking about the Paris Climate Agreement? Is that what we're talking about? Okay. Yeah, so I'm not doing it this year, but yeah, at last MisesU, which listeners and viewers can go see, I had the economics of the Paris Climate Agreement. I did a talk. So this is something where, for my day job at the Institute for Energy Research, I specialize in climate change economics. And this is something where the more I got into it, the more I realized just how upside down the conventional discussion is. So I want to be clear. I think a lot of people hearing me say this are going to say, oh, so you think this is all a big hoax that Al Gore? No, I'm saying even if you stipulate the UN IPCC documents on, the various physical science behind it, the standard thing, just to give an example, so it's just taken for granted that, oh yeah, we need to limit total global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. So first of all, notice the hubris involved there. People are just casually talking about how we're going to regulate the Earth's temperature. So again, the central planning mentality there is amazing. But beyond that, so the Paris Agreement said clearly, as an absolute limit, we have to limit it to 2C and preferably keep it closer to 1.5C. So you would think that the standard literature shows that the benefits of limiting warming to 2C far exceed the economic compliance costs. And yet, using the IPCC's own documents, I can go through and show that no, if in middle of the road scenarios of various outcomes and things like emission trajectories and the climate sensitivity and all that stuff, just picking middle of the road things, it will cost the economy more in forfeited output from hitting that target than we avoid in climate change damages on the margin from limiting it to 2C rather than whatever business as usual would be. Again, that's not like me grabbing numbers from shadow stats. That's using the UN's own published stuff about what the consensus says. So it's amazing that even on their own terms, what they're saying. Another thing, if all the countries who signed up for the Paris Agreement met the targets they themselves claimed they would achieve, global warming would go past 3 degrees Celsius. Okay, so even if they did what they said they were going to do, which they won't because it's painful, even if they lived up to all their pledges, it wouldn't come close to meeting the target. So it's so weird when Trump pulled out of that thing and everyone freaked out like this is the end of the world. It was like, no, according to your own narrative, even if Trump stayed and everyone hit their target, it would still be catastrophe according to your own narrative. And so that's what I'm saying, this whole debate, like the disconnect between the way it's reported and then what the actual published literature says. There's this huge chasm there. It's amazing.
Agree with everything you said, and watched a great lecture by him. It's amazing. It is really, really eye-opening, and much more of that stuff in there. To finish it up, one really quick question.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin? Is it a useful currency created by the free market, by the people, for the people? And does it support the Austrian basic ideas of a sound money, of a politically neutral money?
I hesitate to like make sweeping statements one way or the other. What I will say is yes, if nothing else, for sure, it shows the emergence of a spontaneous market, free market currency. And so people can realize you don't need the state to create money. So that's, hands down, normal people can see that who don't care about economics or don't care about politics. One huge virtue of Bitcoin is that it is harder even than gold and silver, because technically, an asteroid could come with a bunch of gold or something, whereas Bitcoin, mathematically, that's limited. So those are its huge virtues. Disadvantages, of course, things like, a gold coin, there's a sense in which that can't be traceable, whereas at least the Bitcoin network, it's pseudonymous at best. So there's various things, and I know there's Monero and there people are coming up with other stuff as well. So certainly this is a very interesting thing. It's just to study in terms of new possibilities, like our understanding of the regression theorem. Bitcoin certainly challenged a lot of us to say, wait, let's think through this a little bit more carefully. So I certainly would say that, and yes, if it's free market, let it flourish and let's see what happens.
Absolutely, and I think the regression theorem still holds. But I think Menger and Mises made a slight misjudgment that they said that a commodity money, a tangible money, is necessary in order to create a money, a tangible good, a 3D rolled good. And I disagree here. It doesn't have to be tangible. It only needs to be scarce. Because if it has the attribute that if I give it to you, I no longer have it, it has an attribute of money. And Bitcoin has that. But we already have 1 o'clock, so the next lecture is just about to start. It's actually already going to start. So I want to thank you, Bob Murphy, for coming here and talking to the World Crypto Network live at the Mises Institute, the best week of the year, on land by far, because there is the Contra Krugman Cruise that he and Tom Woods organizes. So please check out the Contra Krugman podcast, which is amazing if you want to hear all the fallacies in Krugman's thinking. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Rico, on live from Paris. You can please donate to the Mises Institute. They really need more money in order to spread the words of liberty and peace and freedom. Donate the World Crypto Network so that you can get more stuff like this. Isn't that amazing, though? Check out Rico's channel, and thank you both to Walter Block, who was here earlier, and Dr. Robert Murphy, who is here now. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you on the next show.